number 359. 359. Tonight being Friday, I will be your host, and we'll be dealing with some constitutional and legal matters. My name is Leonard Brackett, and we were having a little problem uh, with the communications, and we can't resolve it. So for tonight, I think I'm going to have to ride solo, and Mr. Wade was available just now, but we had to postpone the possibility of us spending the rest of the night back and forth, not being able to hear each other. And so, in the interest of timeliness, I'm going to attempt to do a solo program tonight. And thanks to Mr. Wade for at least being there and pointing out that there was some problem, and therefore I'll just proceed to do the best I can for tonight. And then I'll deal with the other issue, hopefully by our next program. Uh, I'll just like to say, I'll follow the same format as we normally do on our program, which is to offer a short word of prayer, after which we do a short reading. So I'll do the short prayer for right now. I'm going to go ahead and bow my head and pray. Divine loving Father, once again we come before thy presence, asking that thou would continue to abide with us, that thou would continue to strengthen and protect us, to nurse our hearts, our desires, even our most secret thoughts, loving Father. These are the words of our mouth and the meditation of our mind and the contriteness of our hearts be acceptable before thy divine presence, now and always. We pray that thou mayest bless our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, those of us who have, and that thou would bless the rest of our extended family members, our significant others, as well as our brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunts, wherever they are. Please bless our country of Belize, its people and leadership. Please bless this country of the United States, its people and leadership. Please bless the rest of humanity as well, loving Father. Especially those people who are in war zones, those who are in tornado areas, hurricane areas, those who are in earthquake areas. Divine loving Father, don't answer our trials and tribulations. Please have mercy upon us. And as I present this program tonight, I pray that thou must grant me the words with which to do an adequate program that benefits our country, Belizean and its people, those at home and abroad. For us, his mercies in Jesus' name. Amen. I'll go ahead and do our short scripture reading as well. No. Okay, let me go back a little further here. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to find. Let me do a reading from the book of Job. And I'll read Job chapter 5, verses 1, starting at verse 1. Call now, if there be any that will answer thee, and to which of the saints will thou turn? For wrath killeth the foolish man, and envy slayeth the silly one. I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I cursed his habitation. His children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate. Neither is there any to deliver them. And that was the reading, Job chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. Uh, as I previously indicated, tonight's program will be dealing with some constitutional matters. And I'd like to go to, let me see, just spare me a second. Let me upload this particular section here that I want to go to. Let's see. Uh-oh. I'm going to have a problem finding this now. Let's go to this one. Okay. I'm getting there. Just be patient with me. We have been dealing with some issues relating to the modification of the Constitution of Belize that is being attempted under what is known in Belize by the PCC Commission, which, for all intents and purposes, by now should have been disbanded, because according to the word that is circling, they have completed their task of educating the Belize people, even though the Belize people have not been educated any much more than they have previously. And they have also delivered to the Prime Minister a set of recommendations from which we have been dissecting those recommendations and comparing them to what the Constitution currently says. Because as of right now, most of the people are not aware of as to what those recommendations are or how those recommendations will impact our current Constitution. And people should have been made aware of that before they have been tasked with the, well, it's not even a task, as a matter of fact. Before they are allowed to exercise their rights, is another way of saying it, and that's, I think, the proper way that I would like to say it. Because for any substantive change to be made to the Constitution in the way that these people are attempting to do, it requires a plebiscite, a referendum of the people, registered voters of the country. But they are also stipulating in this report, according to the PCC Act, which is a documentation they process through the House to allow them to get money out of the treasury of the country to pay for the undertaking that they pursued. And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, a report was submitted to the Prime Minister, which is not really public after so many months so far, and the people are not anymore the wiser as to what is it that ails these politicians, and why is it that they want to abrogate and eviscerate major sections of the Belize Constitution. We took it upon ourselves to help with some of the education process, and that is the reason why currently we're going through this process of hopefully enlighten the populace on these matters. It shouldn't have to fall on our shoulder to do that, because, like I said, they have taken on multiple amount of millions of dollars out of the treasury to facilitate paying for the service to be rendered to the people. It has not been done, and we are just trying to do the next best. So for tonight's program, please bear with me again, because I'm going to go through the same process as I've been doing on most of the Friday nights in regards to trying to finish up these recommendations. So we have recommendation. Okay, let me get the recommendation number. I think it's number 62 that I'm on right now. Last week I did to the recommendation 60, 60 and 61, if I remember correctly. No, I skipped over 60 and 61. And last week I did recommendation. Hold it for you. Just a minute. Okay. Okay. So I think they have a misnomer here. They enumerated these things incorrectly because they have a recommendation. Okay. I dealt with the whole of section of part 4 that relates to the Governor General the week before and last week. This week I should be dealing with, let me see, just bear patient with me for a second, please. And I have to physically locate this. Okay. So tonight I want to deal with, exactly as I previously mentioned, recommendation number 63, establishment of the executive authority that they are proposing, as if the executive authority is not already established, which is the means by which they get assent to go to the Governor General to get the powers of governance and become ministers and then govern the country. It seemed like they forgot what they did because they went to the Governor General, had the Governor General sent to them the powers of the executive powers of governance to the Prime Minister and the other ministers that was recommended. And now they're going to come with this shenanigans saying that, oh, they're going to establish a. So I'm going to read exactly out of the recommendation here. Recommendation number 63, establishment of the executive authority. There's no need for them to establish something that's already established. So they're trying to hoodwink the people by pretending or letting the people get the idea that, oh, this is what they got to do in order for them to give us proper government. They have to establish something that was not established. There was no way for them to have gotten the powers of governance somehow or another by osmosis or by some arbitrary and capricious accident or miracle. That power just fell out of the sky into their lap or their brains or their hands or their possession. They went to the Governor General and swore allegiance to the country. They swore fidelity to the Constitution. And now they're pretending like there was no Constitution or there is none. So they got to go ahead and establish what needs to be available because it's not available according to them. They're so slick. But let me read on because, time is going, and as I said, it's 100 out of these recommendations that we have to deal with, some of which we passed over previously and did not deal with because they relate to citizenship and others. And we're trying to keep the process of this educational process that we're undertaking in a sequence that makes sense, rather than just jumping here, there, and everywhere on a lot of different variable topics all at once, just by reading from A to B, C, D, and E, because that's not the way it was supposed to be structured. Anyhow, so number 63 of their recommendation under subsection 1 reads as follows. Repeal sections 36, subsection 1 of the Belize Constitution and replace with the executive authority of Belize is vested in the Prime Minister, which is not true or correct, but according to their wishes, they would hope to make this amendment and allow that to happen, because according to them, they want to eviscerate the powers and the authority of the Governor General, as we found out last week in their recommendation, in the earlier recommendations. So they will have nobody to assign power to them. They will just grab power and execute or exercise those powers freely to their heart content. Now, I don't know how they won't grab that power because that power is not vested in them. Uh, let me read a little part of the Belize Constitution here quickly to contextualize what is it we're talking about, okay? Let me see. Okay, quickly. I'll read this little part here for context. Part 5 of the Constitution of Belize, under the executive at Section 36 of the Constitution, subsection 1 reads as follows. The executive authority of Belize is vested in Her Majesty or His Majesty, being the case as of now. Okay. Subsection 2 reads as follows. Subject to the provisions of this Constitution, meaning the Constitution of Belize, the executive authority of Belize may be exercised on behalf of Her Majesty or His Majesty by the Governor General, either directly or through officers subordinate to him or her as the Governor General. In other words, what is to be understood from that statement is that the first statement under subsection 1 is that the executive authority of Belize is vested in His Majesty currently. And what's to be understood from the second subsection 2 is that those authorities vested in His Majesty may be exercised by the Governor General on behalf of on behalf of the head of state, either directly by himself and or herself, as in the case where we have Ms. Salam being the Governor General right now, or either directly or through officers subordinate to him or her as the Governor General. That is to say, the Prime Minister is subordinate to the Governor General in the exercise or the ability to be able to exercise executive authority. Okay? The head of state have the authority vested in him, and the Governor General acting on his behalf or at his working for him or at his pleasure has the powers and authority to grant certain authorities to her subordinate officers, which is what happened when the Prime Minister goes, after the general election is held and the Prime Minister goes to the Governor General for ascension of governance powers, executive powers. Subsection 3 reads as follows. Neither in this section shall prevent the National Assembly, or nothing in this section shall prevent the National Assembly from confirming functions on persons or authorities other than the Governor General. Why? Because the National Executive does not confer powers to the Governor General. It's the other way around. The Governor General confer powers and authority to the National Assembly. And any law, substantive law, or changes to the Constitution that the National Assembly wishes to make before it becomes legal, lawful, and constitutionally empowered, it requires the ascension of the Governor General, without which it remains just a proposal. It has no effect on powers of law. So I just read that little part there to contextualize what the Constitution, I believe, says in regards to the variance that this proposal that the government is trying to get done under the PCC Act, which is not currently These proposals currently under the PCC Act have no power of law or lawfulness or legality behind them as of right now. They have not been passed in the House and they have not been assented to by the Governor General. They have not been published in the Gazette and they have not been tested in the court in regards to whether or not they are constitutional, legal, or lawful. So there's a lot of different phases and stages that they got to go through before they get to that point where they can defer to this proposal, then being the new law, if they can get there, as compared to abiding by the current law and holding fidelity to the current law, because we only have one constitution at a time. But these jackals and hyenas and vultures and vampires and scofflaw are hoodwinking the people into letting the people believe that whatever they say is the law of the land. Whatever they get up and say on any given day, that becomes the law of the land for that day until they change their mind and come up with another law another day. Belize is not a kingdom anymore. We're a country of law and lawfulness. And it is required of those who we entrust with all powers of governance for them to abide by the existing constitution and the laws, operate lawfully, and make policies or exercise or pursue policies of state with the powers of the state to the benefit of the people and country of Belize. Before reading the rest of this, I would just like to say the reason why these guys are trying to grab onto these powers as they're stipulating here is that they don't want to be accountable. As of right now, even with the current constitution that we have and the present law, supreme law of the land that we have, they're acting like they have no respect and regards for the constitution. They are being violative of the constitution. And they want to act in such a manner to be arbitrary and capricious, with the way they want to govern. For all intents and purposes, they want to govern as autocrats. Right? The constitution is an albatross around their neck. It's an inconvenience to them. Anyhow, let's move on. Did I? Okay, no. I'm going to read section 2, subsection 2 of section 63 that they were proposing, right? I read 1, and I'm going to read the 2 right now. Repeal section 36, subsection 2, and replace with subject to the provision, open quotation, subject to the provisions of the Constitution, the executive authority of Belize may be exercised on behalf of the people of Belize, either directly or through the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister, Deputy Ministers, or officers subordinate to the Prime Minister. Now, I would guess that somehow or another, at that point, they would have already had the powers then for the Prime Minister to be the head of state or act as the head of state and with the powers of the head of state. But until they get there, they're only pretending to be acting because that's the way they're acting. So for right now, it's just a pretense. Okay? It's just a bastardization of what the facts are supposed to be, a bastardization of the Constitution as it currently is, compared to how they are behaving and acting. They're acting as if this proposed constitutional amendment is already in effect. And they have no regards or consideration or respect for the existing Constitution. You can only have one at a time. We can't have two. And they are pretending like the second one is already in effect and disregarding the existing Constitution. They are also proposed under subsection 3 of the same section 63, sorry. They say repeal section 36 of the Constitution of Belize, 36 subsection 2. And under their subsection 4 recommendation, They also propose to repeal Section 37 all the way through Section 49. For all intents and purposes, eviscerate the whole of that section of the Constitution. For those of you who have never read it, don't know what it's all about, according to these guys, they will just as well have you forget that it ever existed or have any interest in it because they want it to be eviscerated. And for those who are not scholars in the matter or the subject, there will be no need for them to go and research or find out because as of right now, nobody is interested, or very few people are actually interested in learning and understanding these things. And we are trying to provide here on our platform, for example, an education process to facilitate people being able to understand these things a little bit more honestly. I proceed to recommendation number 64, which reads as follows. Establish the direct elections of the Prime Minister. That is that this is how they are proposing and hoping for the Prime Minister to be empowered with the full power of governance. That is to say, the Prime Minister then will be voted on to be elected as a Prime Minister rather than how we have it currently, where when they have the elections, the individual who can command the majority of the people who win is then assigned the position of Prime Minister. So for all intents and purposes, they're saying somebody should run for the position of the Prime Minister, and we could end up with a UDP Prime Minister and a PUP legislator. No, they're not explaining that to the public, right? They're not telling the people what we had, what we have, or what they want. They're trying to guide us to let them get us where they want. Because the people of Belize never asked them to go tamper with the Constitution. They elected them to govern us based on the existing Constitution. But they don't like the current Constitution because, like I said earlier, it's like an albatross around the neck. It requires accountability and it mandates certain requirements of the government. And they don't want to be able to, fulfill those requirements. Anyhow, I'll read recommendation number 64, subsection 2, which goes as follows. The executive branch shall include the following functions and powers. And for those functions, under paragraph A, it reads, the Prime Minister acts as the head of state and the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces. Does Belizean understand what that means? For all intents and purposes, they haven't told us yet that we will eventually become a republic. I have been saying that on this particular platform for years now. But what this is leading, according to these revisions that they want to have here, is for us to empower the Prime Minister to have ultimate powers, unchecked powers. Once we concede those powers to the Prime Minister, not being Prime Minister then, because he will be head of state. For all intents and purposes, then we'll say the President. Okay? So that's more likely the way the description fits. Our Prime Minister will then become the head of state as well as the President, and no more Prime Ministers. Okay? And in this instance, it will be like in the republics. We will finally get to do what the republics do, which is vote for their own head of state. When I point out on various occasions that Belize have a conditional independence, people jump in the air and they start getting on, like it's carnival, right? But the bottom line is that the fact remains we are an independent country, but that independence is a conditional independence. You see what I'm reading here right now? Is the way that they are hoping to amend our constitution and for them to be able to exercise those powers when they get these amendments into place, if they do, so that they can then act fully independent, not conditionally, right? Because there's a lot of legal minds that discuss these matters and still are hesitant to accept the reality that I just point out to you, the public, listening to this particular show tonight. You probably heard me say it before on other occasions, but we're now showing and putting in the black and white pieces in their own words and in the words of the Constitution. Why is it that they want to change the Constitution? We didn't ask them to go do that. Nor did they tell us that they wanted to do that until after when they went ahead and decided, they tricked the people into believing, okay, well, they will come to the people, educate the people about the existing Constitution, and then ask the people what do they want to do with the existing Constitution, if they want to change anything or add anything to it. No, they only wanted the permission from the people to say, well, they go to, in fact, they didn't even get the permission from the people. They went to the House and they passed a PCC Act authorizing them to go ahead and get money out of the Treasury, as I stipulated earlier in the program, for them to actually turn around and spend that money to educate the people, which they never did. The task was never completed. You could walk around Belize City right now, or any part of Belize as a country, and just pick randomly 10 people off the streets and ask them one question. Do you want your constitution changed into making your head of state your president? And most of those 10, out of those 10 people, in fact, I would say at least about 8 of them, or let's say 7, let's be magnanimous. 7 of them would tell you they don't know what the Constitution says about those matters, but that probably they have individual preferences which will amount to just a yearning to fulfill or complete that full independence that we were supposed to be exercising. Why? Because we don't vote for head of state. But if given the opportunity, I would say 7 or 8 of them would say yes, they would want to vote for their own head of state. That's the way they are being coached. The people are being coached to fall in line with these proposals. It is only with the acquiescence of the people that these proposals will ever see the light of day as regards to becoming legitimately, legally, lawfully, and constitutionally a part of the Belize Constitution. So they're trying to hoodwink their way with the people into getting the people there. Anyhow, I have a bell ringing in the background. Not gonna. I don't have the time to attend to it, so it's gonna have to ring. I'll just continue on with the show. Okay. The Prime Minister shall not. Okay. No, I didn't finish the whole part. Paragraph A. Let me continue on in paragraph A. He says he is responsible for implementing and enforcing the laws passed by the National Assembly. Before the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmations as prescribed by Schedule X, which already exists in the Constitution today. Open quotation is what the individual will then have to say, and I'm going to read it now. It says, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the Prime Minister of Belize and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend Belize and the Constitution of Belize, which is to say, they're expressing fidelity to the Constitution of Belize, right? That's what they already did before they got the powers of governance assented to them after they won the election. That's what they did, as I described earlier, and as most people in Belize would know. They go after the election, who win the majority of the seats in the House, go to the Governor General to be assented. And as part of the assenting process, they have to swear allegiance to the country. They have to swear allegiance to the Constitution. They have to swear fidelity to the people without going through that process, that protocol. They just can't arbitrarily and capriciously decide, okay, well, you know what? We won the election, so to hell with the Governor General. We don't want to see her face. We'll just go ahead and run the country the way we want. They have no vested power to do so until they go and get that ascension. So no, they don't want any Governor General exist in the country anymore. They want to just decide among themselves who win, whether they win or lose, who could grab the power or who hold control of the powers, like the republics, and just move on and govern the place. They are accountable to no one, not even including the people. Once they have the powers to govern, there's no checks and balances. The Prime Minister wants to be the head of the executive. He wants to be also the head of the judiciary. He wants to be also, which is by any means, before he gets to become Prime Minister, he has to become the head of the legislative body. So he wants to be the head of everything. No wonder that he decided that he was going to interfere into the judiciary processes and demand that the investigative material comes to him for him to decide how to deal with that matter. He overreached, he overextended, he grabbed onto power that is not vested in his executive portfolio. That power is vested in the portfolio of the DPP under his judiciary. There's different powers under the judiciary for the DPP. There's different powers under the executive for the Attorney General in terms of legality, lawfulness, and constitutional powers vested in them in those particular offices. But they're not all one and the same. The head of the judiciary is the Chief Justice. The head of the executive is the Prime Minister. The head of the legislature is the Prime Minister. But the Constitution vests in each of those branches of government, all three of them, separate powers that they're not supposed to transgress or interfere with each other, to the extent that when the Prime Minister decides he wants to take over his judiciary functions, It shows that he's becoming arbitrary and capricious. It shows that he's becoming autocratic. It shows that he wants to haul and pull the system and do what he wants when he wants, and nobody should be able to stop him. That's not the system of governance we entertain in Belize. Anyhow, I'll just read on. I'm still currently reading from the PCC recommendation, and I was reading under number 63, recommendation number 63, and I just read paragraph A, and I'm going to go ahead and read paragraph B. The Prime Minister shall nominate, subject to the provisions of the Senate, by simple majority, all ministers, Attorney General, Deputy Minister, Chairman of government statutory bodies or boards, Chairman of commissions, heads of departments, Governor of the Central Bank, judges, magistrates, ambassadors, and other officials who are vested and approved by the majority. I gotta go to the next page. By the majority of the Senate of the National Assembly, and no person appointed by the Prime Minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. Why? Because the members of the National Assembly are the legislative body. But right there's a contravention, because it is members of the legislative body, members of parliament, from which the Prime Minister picks his cabinet members. So then, how can they stipulate here that no member that the Prime Minister picked to be a member of these particular bodies, right? How come then it's contradicting right within the same, from the beginning of the paragraph and ending up at the end of the paragraph, right? The Prime, and as a matter of fact, most of what is stipulated here is currently in the Constitution. That's the way it is being currently done. Okay? Currently, the Prime Minister picks his cabinet members from among the legislative body, the people that win the general election, the members of parliament, basically. And he also appoints the senators. The senators are not elected senators. 6 of those senators are appointed by the party that wins the majority of the seat, that then being the same person as the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, according to our current system, is given the position of Prime Minister because he commands the majority of the people in the legislature, in Parliament. And then there's he also appoints 6 of those in the senators. He appoints. I'll read exactly what it says here again, just for clarity, consistency and clarity. Under section C. No, let me go back to section to the other page. I was at section B. The Prime Minister shall nominate, subject to the approval of the Senate by simple majority, all ministers, okay, who are to be members of his cabinet. The Attorney General as well, which he does currently. The Deputy Ministers, which he does currently. The Chairman of Government Statutory Boards, which he does currently. Chairman of Commissions, which he also does currently. Heads of Department, which he also does currently. The Governor of the Central Bank, which he also does currently. He does not appoint the judges. He does not appoint the ambassadors or the magistrates or the ambassadors. But according to their proposal now, he will be taking over the powers and ruling or lording over the judiciary. That's a violation of the separation of powers doctrine or criteria. He's currently wanting to do that, or at least as regards to the Bunna affair, that's what he was or is doing. Hard and pulling the process in order for him to see where culpability is being directed as far as the reports and the investigation. Why? I don't know. Only somebody that have something to hide, either for himself or for someone else, will make such a major bastardization and transgression of the whole system in order to safeguard, I don't know what. What is it that he is hiding or trying to, exculpate? Who and on whose behalf? I go on to read the rest of this portion, which is to say, I just said that he also, according to this proposal, is supposed to appoint judges, is supposed to appoint magistrates, is supposed to appoint ambassadors and other officials who are vetted and approved by the majority and in the Senate of the nation. It doesn't read correct here when it says majority of the Senate of the National Assembly, because the Senate and the National Assembly, they use the National Assembly building for Senate meetings as well as the parliamentarian meetings. But people could actually perceive that as a conflation. It says, no person appointed by the Prime Minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. How can that be true? In that same paragraph, and we just read at the top, the Prime Minister shall nominate, subject to the approval. Just let me move something down here. Holy shit. I went to clear up something that was blocking a part of the stuff, and somehow I end up. Oh man, what did I do? What happened here? Yeah, okay. I got back to a certain part, and I hope I could. Just bear with me for a second, please. These electronic devices, they have a way that when you touch the surface, if you're not paying proper attention, you can do things that you didn't intend to do or end up with outcomes or results that are unexpected. And I touched the surface of the device just now at the wrong location. It took me to somewhere else and hid what I was reading on it. Oh, man. Okay. I was trying to clarify the point that is contradictory here in this one paragraph. That is to say, the Prime Minister shall nominate, subject to the approval of the Senate by simple majority, all ministers. Okay? He currently does that. And the people that he uses as his ministers come from two sections of the legislative body. That is to say, primarily most of his ministers or cabinet members are from the parliamentarian group, the people that help him to get his majority. And then after he gets his majority, he goes, as the proposed prime minister, he goes and he appoints some senators. And if he needs to use one or two of those senators that he appoints as members of his cabinet, he is free to do that constitutionally. So currently, That power is vested in him through the Governor General as the Governor General's subordinate. It's currently being done like that. So why are they going to write here that they're proposing to do that? And then, after stipulating that he is authorized, as currently is the case, to do that, they go at the end. Let me go at the other page where I was pointing out the conflation or disagreement. It says, no person appointed by the Prime Minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. The members of the National Assembly are members of the parliamentarians, the area representatives who win. And as part of the National Assembly as well, you have the Senate, some of whom are appointed by the Prime Minister, others appointed by the opposition leaders, and others appointed by other non-profit and social partners, non-profit organization and social partners. There's 13 of them in the Constitution of Belize in the Senate. So how can they, in good conscience, make such a stipulation that the Prime Minister shall be, it says, let me read it. No person appointed by the Prime Minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. How can that be? He appoints his cabinet. Those are members of the Assembly. Those are, it's contradictory. So they need to go back and clean this up. Of course, it's a proposal, right? So I hope from the time they made that proposal, which is quite a few months before now, until now, somewhere, somehow they have figured out that, there's an error, there's a conflation, okay? But what happened? They put these documents together by cut and paste. As I said, they're referring to things that are currently in the present Constitution, and then they add little bits and pieces here and there to try and so-called make it the way they would like for it to be. And they're still making basic mistakes. How can the Prime Minister take members of the Parliament to constitute his cabinet? And he also takes senators to constitute his cabinet. And then you're telling him at the end of this paragraph here, as I was reading, no person appointed by the Prime Minister shall be a member of the National Assembly. That's backwards. You can't be both. So this particular statement needs to be revised to say the members appointed by the members appointed to the cabinet can be members of Parliament or of the National Assembly. I'd like to skip that one. I think I've belabored that enough already, and I'd like to go to paragraph C. The Prime Minister shall receive heads of state, ambassadors, and other public ministers. That is currently the purview and the authority vested in the Governor General. For those of you who may not know or recognize or realize that. So the Prime Minister is also, in addition to all the offices that he has already taken on or is dealing with currently and can't deal with them adequately or effectively, because he's constantly complaining that he was not aware of certain misfeasance or bad deeds that people are doing under his portfolios. But he's proposing here to take on all these additional responsibilities. In other words, as the supposed head of state then, which is proposed, He's responsible for any and everything that has to do with governance, and all of those departments has to work under his directions, either directly or indirectly. Bite off more than they could chew, but anyhow, let me read the other part of this, which continues to say, and he shall have power, which is really what the issue is. Power. It's all about power. That one word. So it says, and he shall have power, subject to the approval of the Senate, to make treaties, covenants, convention, agreements, protocols, regional and international organizations, provided 2/3 of the Senate uh, present. It can't be anyhow. Well, let me stop quibble for a little bit, some people. 2/3 of the Senate present concur and approve such agreements. Do you know that we currently have the Senate holding that right and responsibility under our present constitution? The Senate determines and has to deal with treaties, but the Prime Minister is going to now take that onto himself, and the Senate will go ahead and ratify a treaty, but they will not determine whether or not, how the treaty, are supposed to be affected. They're just going to go ahead and rubber stamp that according to the stipulation here, apparently. As well as he will deal with all the protocols. I mean, what do we have a foreign minister for then? Currently, under the portfolio of the foreign minister, they deal with the protocols for foreign affairs. So then the Prime Minister might as well disband the Foreign Affairs Office if his office is going to be dealing with that. Or he may quite as well take on the Foreign Affairs portfolio. I mean, that's another way of, justifying what is being proposed here. But for people who are aware of these things, knowledgeable about these things, and keep tabs on these things, it's just rid of, havoc. One word, like I said earlier, power. They are currently drunk with power and doing a whole lot of crazy stuff that's not supposed to be done. I recall one foreign minister in the past said that we don't even have a border with Guatemala. There's no existing border. And he was the foreign minister at that. That's something to point out to you or say to you that when I'm saying these things or pointing out these things, it's not because I'm trying to be gratuitous with my words or just complain for complaint's sake. We have had these scenarios before where people step on their own heel. I'll go ahead and read section D, and I think there's E, F. There's quite a few more left. I don't know if I need to get into the details of that. I'll just forego that for right now, because we do need to get to the other sections of this. I think, let me see. Okay. Yeah, since we are at the Prime Minister, let's deal with amendment recommendation, I would say, recommendation number 65, which is going to deal with the Deputy Prime Minister. And it says, qualifications and disqualifications of Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. No person shall be qualified to be elected or continue to be elected as Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister who, as in the case of paragraph A below, is, by virtue of his own act, under the acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power or state. Let me just move this up a little. Or state, international organization, or community has dual nationality or possesses more than one passport of different state, is an undischarged bankrupt, having been adjudged or otherwise, gotta move this stuff down a little bit, or otherwise declared bankrupt under any law in force in any part of the world. So they have been very onerous here in this particular recommendation, and part of it was being done so to deprive, as in the instance of Mr. Shine Barrow, for whom they try to put in motion amendment number 11 of the Constitution of Belize to block him because he is an adjudged criminal, served time abroad. So that's why they're saying anyone who have served or who have committed a crime and has been adjudged as a criminal in any part of the world, they're trying to grandfather a situation where he then becomes unable to continue just to be elected and or to continue to be the prime minister. Now, remember, every time they talk about prime minister in this amendment stuff here, they're not talking about prime minister the way we know the current prime minister to be, or any other past prime minister. They're talking about prime minister and head of state being one and the same. But for more effects, they're talking about a prime minister who is, for all intents and purposes, the president of Belize. Well, I shouldn't even say it like that. The president of a future Belize. Oh no, let me fix it up. Clean up again. A prime minister who, for all intents and purposes, is actually the head of state and president of the Republic of a future Republic of Belize. That's a little bit more clear. I hope I got it straight this time. I was bubbling it a few times just now, but let me repeat that again, please. When these people are in this particular proposal here, or these amendments here that they're proposing, are speaking to a prime minister or the position of a prime minister, they are conflating as to say the current prime minister or the person that we currently perceive as our prime minister, who would then have the powers and authority of the head of state, and in that regards, more like a president rather than a prime minister. They're actually talking about not the current Belize, but a future Republic of Belize, which is really where they're trying to take us, little by little. But they don't think that any of us are smart enough to be able to figure out the bits and pieces. They already classify us as being talentless. We don't have talent. Okay, only they have talent. They know where they want to go. They know how they're gonna get us there, and little by little they're getting us there. And we're not supposed to know the difference that from where we were to where we end up. The more of the information they keep away from us, according to them, the better off they are in terms of achieving their agenda. But they fail to remember and recognize that in Belize, we have different levels of people, different intellectual capabilities, different gray mass quotient. We have experienced people. Yes, we might have a lot of people who are, I think there was a time when we had like 98% literacy in our country of Belize. We were one of the highest in Central and South America. No, we're like probably at the bottom. We don't have the same intellectual quotient, intellectual I mean, not everybody in Belize is competing with each other to enhance their intellectual capabilities. That used to happen back when I was a kid growing up. But now these guys are telling us to our face. In fact, not only just these guys, I could specifically call out the Prime Minister himself, Mr. John Briceño, said that Belizeans don't have talent. Now, I know some people that are Belizeans who are abroad who have so much talent that the countries abroad that they're living in make much of their talent. And those same Belizeans with all that talent are despised and dismissed in Belize. There's no place for them. How sad. But let me get back to the focus of the presentation for tonight. Okay, I want to go back to A because in paragraph A, I read paragraph A, B, and C consecutively. But I want to address paragraph A in terms of some of the things that it stipulates because I need for clarity as well as for proper context. Okay, let me just go ahead and read it. Paragraph A reads as follows. Oh, shucks, but before I read that, I need to reread what came before that. And it says, no person shall be qualified to be elected or continue to be elected. Like I said, that statement was being thrown in there to try and knock out Mr. Shine Barrow, who was the leader of the opposition, from being able to, if God forbid that he had gotten successful in politics to the extent of having his party that he was leading get a majority, and he then would have had the opportunity to become a prime minister. Any prime minister then, according to this new proposal that they're making here, that would have fell into his category, having been an offender, having been adjudicated, and having spent times in jail, irrespective of the fact that it's not only about doing so in Belize, but having done so abroad. They're stipulating that in any part of the world. So they basically were saying this gentleman could not have run, and since he had already run and win, he could not have win and continue to run and then become the prime minister. He would have been disqualified because that's what it's talking about here under 65. Recommendation 65 says qualifications and disqualifications for prime minister and deputy prime minister. So it says no person, as in the case of Mr. Barrow, for example, as I was stipulating for, it says no person shall be qualified to be elected or continue to be elected as a prime minister or deputy prime minister who, as in the case of paragraph A, is by virtue of his own act under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power, state, or international organization or community. So they were trying to basically shelf him and anybody else who would fall under that category. Why? Because these Belizean politicians, while they're in Belize and are in politics, don't perceive themselves as having any need to go to America or anywhere else because they could thief enough, you know, they could greedy up enough of the assets of the country, then go in without a couple of pennies to rub together. And in the first term, they come out as millionaire. And if they serve 2 terms, they come out as multi-millionaire. And if they serve 3 terms or more, they come out as mega millionaire with all kind of government assets stuffed into their back pocket. So they don't have to go to America or any other country or become a dual citizenship or having swearing allegiance to any other country. Whereas our present constitution says that Belizeans are entitled under the constitution to the right of dual citizenship so long as the other second country accepts such a premise. So in America, until now, well, of course, now it's becoming a lot different. But previous to now, in America, you could be a dual citizen. There's a lot of Jewish people who have American citizenship and Israeli citizenship. There's a lot of people from other countries, including like myself, for example, or I wouldn't say myself because I don't fall into that category. I'm not an American by citizenship. I'm only a Belizean by citizenship. And I'm a green card holder because I reside in the United States of America for almost 50 years. Okay? But the bottom line is, I am entitled to have dual citizenship based on my constitution. If I were to choose to avail myself of that privilege or right, it's not even just a privilege, it's a right that's bestowed upon me constitutionally. And so a lot of other Belizeans who have dual citizenship are entitled to the rights of any other Belizean or any other American. That's what citizenship is about. The rights conferred to you by the Constitution of that particular nation or country, where you enjoy the privilege, the God-given privilege, and the constitutional rights to be a member of that country. Whether you was born there or it was granted to you, by legal means. These guys are proposing here now that they're actually trying to write in disqualifications for people who currently could have been a contender to the position that they want to inherit or take over. So they make the law so onerous to the point where only they can qualify. They come up with all kind of back and forward stuff that the Constitution does not allow for, and they ignore what the Constitution allows for. And as I said earlier, under paragraph A, anybody who is by virtue of his own act under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power or state or international organization or community, they will be disqualified from being able to run in Belize and become a minister, a prime minister, a plenipotentiary prime minister, such as a head of state, president of a future potential Republic of Belize. They would qualify. For those of us who have gone abroad or live abroad, all rights, according to them, will be truncated or should be truncated based on what they are writing here, which is contrary to the Constitution. The Constitution already bestowed on us all rights like any and every other Belizeans. But they want to create these onerous laws that are violative of the existing Constitution and pretend that something that is violative and unconstitutional should trump the Constitution. Hogwash. I will not read the rest of that. Just leave it alone because it's a lot of different paragraphs, all the way from A through J. It's a lot of reading. For anyone who would like to entertain themselves in learning a little bit more about that particular topic, you can grab a copy of the Constitution and just review it. Well, in this case, it's not just the Constitution. The presentation is being made both with the Constitution as well as the recommendations that the PCC Act provides to the Prime Minister, which they are keeping in their back pocket, and they're refusing to let the people know what's in there. I'll go to number 66, impeachment. I'm getting close to the time. Oh, no. I still have 15 more minutes to go. So I'll just deal with this matter of the impeachment, for example. Number 66 reads as follows. There shall be a mechanism for impeachment established for all I just got to make this a little smaller because it's cutting off at the end. It makes it harder to read when. Okay. There shall be a mechanism for impeachment established for all elected and appointed officials, all civil servants and head of departments and, and contract officers. Uh, Currently, a prime minister appoints these various high-level officers of state, and he can sack them or take away or withdraw his appointment. Or let me say it in a different way, more constitutionally. The prime minister recommends or make recommendation in regards to these high executive or managerial individual. But the prime minister does not of himself appoint any of these individuals. He just recommends them because the system has allowed for it the ascension and the powers vested in the Governor General for executive purposes for the Prime Minister to get to recommend these high-level people who become assented to. And he can recommend anyone, or he can request the withdrawal of his recommendation to favor anyone. That is to say, ask the Governor General currently or in any future time to withdraw the position for that recommendation. And so therefore, this would be nothing new that they would be putting in here, for example, when it comes to impeachment process. Other than for the fact that if any of these particular individuals are aggrieved as to how they were sacked or taken away from the appointment or how they were dismissed, they can take that matter to court. Under this process here that they're proposing to have a system of impeachment is to boycott the court for all intents and purposes. It's like what you have in the police department, for example. When you have an issue that internal affairs have to deal with, they don't wait for it to go to court. They deal with it internally. That is not to say that the matter cannot be taken to court depending on the type of violation and or who is it that wants to get remedy. If the police department wants to get remedy, they deal with it, like I said, under internal affairs rules and regulations. But if it's a private civilian who wants to take a police officer, for example, to court, regardless of what the police department does, the private civilian still has recourse for a civil suit against that particular police officer, who has committed a breach under the color of law. So, under this impeachment clause, after they finish put it together, because it's just a proposal right now, and it will probably go through a lot of different modifications before it becomes assented to law, and even after it becomes assented to law. The Constitution, from the time it was created in 1981, or accepted in 1981 at the time of independence, has had many modifications done to it from then till now. And the legislative body is empowered to make modifications to bits and pieces of the Constitution. And they're also prohibited from making certain changes of certain parts of the Constitution. It is impermissible, for example, for the Constitution to be changed by the legislator to say, for example, there will not be any judiciary arm of the government anymore. We will just have an executive and a legislative body. We will dispense with the third leg of government, which is and we will write a law, as someone had said before, they can write a law to say that we won't have a judiciary anymore. But that law, if they were to write any such law unto itself, on the face of it, would be constituted as illegal, null, and void, because the Constitution has already pronounced in Section 2 that any other law that the legislator makes that is inconsistent with the existing Constitution, to the extent of its inconsistency, is null and void. So they could make any law they want, but if it's not legal, if it's not lawful, if it's not constitutional, it's null and void. What part of that they won't understand? And I would say they really don't probably understand it. Not because I don't think they do, but they act like they don't understand it, or like I said earlier in the program, they dismiss it and pretend that it doesn't exist, or they don't want to relate to it. They want to do just what they want to do, and to hell with whatever else. And when I call them scoundrels, scofflaws, rascals, and jackals, they get offended, as if calling them those names that fit their behavior is any worse than their transgression of the Constitution or the misbehavior itself. They are more offended for being called out when they do wrong, as compared to being offended when they actually do the wrong. Let me move on. So I read the whole of that part there just now, and I'll just go to amendment number 67. I'm trying to run through some of these quickly, as you might notice. And the reason why is because there's 100 and odd of these things, and we started this task quite a few months before, but we have been sidetracked with other more urgent and pressing daily issues that we had to deal with. So we have just been doing these bits and pieces at a time, no? And I'll try and, in the interest of the amount of time that I have left, which is about 7 minutes, I'll try and see if I can tackle one more. Recommendation number 67, that is, to establish the office of the Deputy Prime Minister. Performance and functions, which shouldn't be too hard to deal with. So under 67, recommendation number 67, subsection 1, they proceed to say, as I read, the Deputy Prime Minister is a part of the executive branch, and he stands ready to assume the Prime Minister's he stands ready to assume the Prime Minister's role should the need arise. He is a part of the cabinet. Whenever the Prime Minister is absent from Belize or is by reason of illness unable to perform the functions conferred on him. Now, who confer functions on him? The Prime Minister. Can anyone answer that question for me? Because based on what we've been reading and dealing with tonight, it would appear that nobody confer any power onto the Prime Minister according to these recommendations here, right? He automatically, by osmosis, or by some miracle, a lightning drop out of the sky and hit him in the head, and he automatically is is is, uh, is empowered or vested with those powers. And here again, as I'm pointing out, it is stipulating that powers are conferred on him. So if there's no governor general that does that conference of powers right now, in the future, and no head of state as we have currently, to whom the governor general is accountable to, then as I asked last week in the presentation of the program, how the devils are they going to get that power assented to them? Are they one day going to say, okay, well, you know what, Miss Governor General, and your boss, the head of state, we don't want to deal with you guys anymore, so we just won't deal with you anymore. And if you guys come to Belize or try to interfere in Belizean affairs, we'll just, put you under the guillotine and off with your head. I'm getting a little facetious now, right? Um, and I'm just trying to describe how jackals operate. In other words, basically what I'm trying to say is that these guys attempting to commit sedition here by the mere factor of making these proposals to vanquish the head of state without doing it in the proper form and manner. So then the alternative then is commit sedition and go up against the head of state with a revolution, capture the head of state, off the head of state, and those who remain behind will become the leaders of and inherit those powers and authorities of the head of state, exercise those powers. But that's neither here nor there. Let me not even trying to give these guys ideas about how to get us in real trouble. I'll read this thing over again. I didn't read the whole of it, but in the interest, I'm running out of time too. I'll read this one over, and I don't think I'll pick up any more until next session. This will be our end of the session for tonight. Recommendation 67, establish the office of the Deputy Prime Minister, functions, performance, and functions. 67.1 reads, it says, the Deputy Prime Minister is a part of the executive, which currently is the executive branch, and he stands ready to assume the Prime Minister's role, which currently happens, should the need arise, and it has arisen quite a few times in the past. So that's nothing new so far. He is a part of cabinet, which is currently the case. Whenever the Prime Minister is absent from Belize or is by reason of illness unable to perform the functions conferred. Remember, that's where we went off track a little earlier when we said perform the functions conferred on him. In accordance with this constitution, those functions other than the functions conferred by this section shall be performed by the Deputy Prime Minister. That's the end of that part. I think there is a little section here that continues. I'm going to go to the next page and pick up. There's subsection 2, subsection 3. So there are 3 sections there, and I'll just read the last part of section 1, which says, or in the absence of the Deputy Prime Minister, by such other minister as the House of Representatives may authorize for that purpose. Subsection 2 reads as follows. The Deputy Prime Minister serves as the President of the Senate, which is not the current case, attends official ceremonies, and where he needs where he needs to cast a deciding. Just a minute. I'm missing out piece of this stuff is truncated. Okay, I'll read that all the way over again. The Deputy Prime Minister serves as the President of the Senate, which is not the case currently, where he attends official ceremonies and where he needs to cast the deciding vote in the case of a tie. So now they're trying to make it like the Republic of America, United States of America, right? Yeah, the deputy, not prime minister, is the vice president. They're calling it a deputy prime minister right now. So they're playing with words, as I keep telling you guys. You know, anytime you see they hear them talk about prime minister or deputy prime minister in this particular documentation here, they're talking about the future president of a future Republic of Belize. When you read the whole thing, you understand those specifics. But if you read just one piece at a time, you will never get the fullness of what is it that they're intimating. Okay? But you can only deal with one piece at a time, and probably a few pieces in any one session for 90 minutes. The Deputy Prime Minister serves as the President of the Senate, which is not the current case, where he attends official ceremonies and where he needs to cast the deciding vote. We already dealt with that particular issue in the Senate in the case of a tie, because our Senate cannot have a tie if you have the full Senate in session. Our Senate, for that same reason, constitute 13 people, an odd number. But let's say, for argument's sake, only 12 people show up for the Senate. They are now intimating that the Vice President, or in this case, the Deputy Prime Minister, sits and lords over the Senate. He will be the head of the Senate. Well, if you're going to have senators be members of cabinet, according to them, why can't members of cabinet be members of the Senate? I'm laughing because that calls for a long discussion and clarification of technical, political, institutional, as well as constitutional issues. So we'll probably, at one point in time, somewhere in the future, deal with that as well. I'll take the next 2 minutes and just close out this subsection 3, which is kind of long. So hopefully I'll just read it through and be over with it, okay? Let me just put it in the center so I can read. Okay, I'll just go ahead and read subsection 3, which is the last part of this section. In the case of the removal of the Prime Minister from office, by who? Who is supposed to remove the Prime Minister from office? According to this new constitution. Or maybe according to them, because they had a proposal for impeachment. That's probably what they're talking about when they talk about it. Because under our present constitution, the Governor General can remove the Prime Minister. I don't know that Belizeans are aware of that, at least currently, but that's what's stipulated in the constitution. But let's just read this stuff here, and get out, like I said. In the case of the removal of the Prime Minister from office, or his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of said office as that of the Prime Minister, the same shall devolve on the Deputy Prime Minister. In the case of the removal of the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, the National Assembly, by law, provide which office shall then act as Prime Minister, which officer shall then act as Prime Minister. All of that is done in a Republican constitution and in Republican countries. Until the disability be removed or a Prime Minister or Prime Minister be elected, the Deputy Prime Minister shall hold the office for the remainder of his term. Any other so appointed by the National Assembly shall perform the duties of Prime Minister for a period not exceeding 6 months, during which time an election for that office shall be called. And that's the end of section 60, recommendation number 67. So that will be the end of our presentation for tonight. And hopefully at our next session of Teachable Moments is in regards to our Constitution and the proposed amendment to the Constitution by the PCC and the PCC Act. We will further discussion on section 68 at our next earliest convenient session. I want to say thanks to you, Belizeans at home and abroad, for having spent your valuable time currently listening to this particular show, Belizean Affairs show number 359. We hope that whatever we presented here tonight may aggregate to some public benefit to you. And even though I was babbling a little bit, I hope that you was able to derive some understanding, because you do need to know what's in these documents. You do need to be able to contextualize what is it that's in the original Constitution with what is it that is being proposed, so you can know how it's going to affect you. And you need to have that understanding before they ask you to come to a referendum to decide whether or not you want your Constitution changed as onerously as they are attempting to do. I hope they just don't put a yes and a no question on the ballot to say, do you want your Constitution changed, yes or no? And that's going to be the only information you will have about what is it that they're attempting to do, because only jackals operate like that. I would say thanks again. Good night. God bless. Belizeans at home and abroad. And take care. See you in the next session. God bless. Bye-bye.